Rukha. Rukha de Kudsha. You want to talk about kosher?
Sure. Well, first of all, Kudsha, anybody ever heard the word kosher? Comes from this right here. If you look at that in the scholarly sense, what the word Kudsha means is intended for mankind, something that is holistic and whole for mankind. If you look at it just literally as its root sounds, it literally means whole, all-encompassing, all-embracing. This here is the word Holy Spirit. First of all, I mentioned last night a lot about spirit, about how it was more accurately breath in Aramaic, and how breath and spirit were not two separate things back then. That happened when Latin spread itself out across the kingdom, and then all of a sudden you had breath and you had spirit. Now today we're looking for spirit, and we're looking for spiritual things, not realizing that what we're looking for is what is looking. And the greatest way to connect with spirit is, and I said yesterday, if you want to understand Yeshua's teachings better in the first century Aramaic perspective, cross out the word spirit and write breath above it. Sounds very Buddhist almost. That's going to give you a much more accurate understanding. The idea of an outside or somehow disembodied spirit that we can't see would have been such a foreign concept that if he were to talk like that, nobody would even know what he was talking about. Not that everybody understood what he was talking about anyway. So this Rukha here that's that word for breath, spirit, energy. It would be pneuma in the Greek, spiritus in the Latin. An elemental force. This is Rukha right here, okay? Now, intriguingly, the word's Rukha, so technically that means this. Rukha is not technically the force, but rather our experience of it. That's what Rukha is. And I said yesterday that in the first century Aramaic understanding, being feminine, what I feel on my arm is not breath in the way that we think of it. What I feel on my arm is just hot air. Breath in Aramaic, in ancient Aramaic, was not the hot air that moves through my body, but rather my feminine experience of its movement. Everybody breathing right now? I can feel like that's a lot different, isn't it? Yeshua wasn't pointing to things and saying, do this and don't do that, and look at that word, and walk this and walk that there, and do that there and that right there. He was talking about coming back to the eye within the eye, and realizing that you can actually answer the question, are you breathing or are you being breathed? Rukha breathes you. When you get your breath moving and you allow your temple to open, she, which is what she was called in the first century, someone can just flippantly in the middle of a conversation say she, and people would know they were talking about the Holy Spirit. Rukha de Kudsha, the all-embracing breath of God. And there's a lot of amazing power in this is the word of. This b is a little prefix, the dalet, which essentially means of, to put it that way. Interesting. And if you can just be aware of your breath and understand the only reason you can't breathe in any moment is because things are up and resonating. And if you don't know how to forgive, you're never going to be able to open your temple, ever, because there's always going to be residue there, there's always going to be junk that's going to keep that from happening.
And it's interesting when he's talking to Nicodemus about this. Nicodemus doesn't have a clue what he's talking about.
The leader of the Jews.
This is it. And Yeshua says, what? You a leader? You don't understand this? And then notice what he defaults to. He then explains to him an elemental force. This word is used to describe all of the elemental forces. And in particular, there's one for humans. But he gives Nicodemus the example of this elemental force called the wind. And he says, you know it came from somewhere, and you know it went somewhere, but you don't know it directly. You can only know it by the effects that it creates. And so in each of us, there is this elemental force for that which is proper for humans. And if you turn yourself over to that energetic flow in you, then that power will process those things out of your structure. Rukha to Kudsha. We could say in our modern language almost a superprocessor. Nicodemus wasn't aware of the superprocessor. And it's interesting to watch how the Greek fear-based translations can turn things so backward. So we hear about this, and over the years I've worked with so many people who, I remember one man who was in his 70s, and he was starting to look at, thinking about, my lifetime is getting short, and he was sure that he was going to hell for eternity. Because as a young man, as a teenager, he did what he considered to be the denial of the Holy Spirit. And he was sure that that's where he was going to burn for eternity. And there's nothing in the Aramaic about the denial of the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin, or the denial of the force for that which is proper. What it says is, in essence, let's kind of do a long form of it. In your carbon-based memory system, your body's structure is made of carbon, 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and anything that's put in there that doesn't belong there is stored holographically in every cell and passed from generation to generation. So we've got 4 generations, we're told, in there. That's 31 lives. If you've got 31 lives in there, and then remember again, last night we talked about 10,000 brain cells firing, 9 bits of data can come to conscious awareness in these pictures that we paint behind our eyeballs. How long do you suppose, if there's a pattern in your family system, it's going to take you processing 9 bits of data at a time to get through it? Not likely to happen anytime soon. What that passage says is being explained is that you have a power in you that if you invite her into activity in you, she will process you right down to your genetic toes. The denial of that power will leave you in unforgiveness. You won't have the capacity to process that much information. It isn't unforgivable. There's nothing like that. But if you're not able to call that power into play in you, if you can't acknowledge that it's there and invite it into activity, then you're on your own. And on your own, it's a pretty stuck place to be.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. But there is literally an elemental force in each of us that if we call it into activity, and when it always amazes me when I watch people do the forgiveness worksheet process, from why is this happening to me again? So often somebody starts that worksheet out and there's this big, messy, arms going in every which way, hate, fear, anger, rage, guilt, grief. And literally 4 minutes after they do the forgiveness process, they're like, well, why was that such a big deal? And where did it go? And it's gone. Probably the most common comment that I get from people, I don't know if you've done this when you've done the worksheet with people, but when I ask people, how do you feel after you've done the forgiveness process compared to before? And before, it's all these emotions and all this stuff. And literally 4 minutes later, it's silly that I ever had any disturbance about that. And the truth is, you've never had any disturbance about anything. You've just been disturbed. Your mind can put it anywhere. When you enter into forgiveness and you call on that force for that which is proper, that force for that which is proper can take a lifetime of trauma in 35 seconds or less and disappear it. Don't quote me as that's some kind of literal number. Just disappear it. And on the other side of it, people are laughing at something that they were extremely traumatized about just minutes ago. But you can't do that on your own. Our own pea brain can't do that level of process work. And so when I can acknowledge that power is in me and can move through me and undo what doesn't belong, untie me or liberate me from those things, everything changes.
Oh yeah, it fits right in with it. So, it's amazing. The Nicodemus thing is funny. He came under the cover of night with it didn't say with his tail between his legs. The leader of the Jews saying, I heard you're some sort of a big deal and I wanted to come and talk to you. But it's intriguing how when he says the wind comes and goes, you don't know where it's coming from or where it's going to, that word's Rukha. And then it says, as it is with spirit. What hand gesture? The wind, he can go like this. What hand gesture would he have to make for spirit? What would he have to do? Foreign concept in the first century. He would have probably gone, as it is with Rukha, as in breath. Remember, breath and spirit were artificially separated later, not yet. Okay? He probably would have gone, and he also says, of course, you must be reborn of Maya and Rukha, Maya as in water. But intriguingly, that word Maya, what it really means is great flowing expanse. It's at the end of Shemaya, which is the word heaven. Must be reborn of the all and its movement, its elemental forces. And there's another thing that's hooked on so often that I get asked about. People say, all right, but what about born again? What does it say in Aramaic? And what I would also say to a biblical scholar is, what does it say in Greek? So, interesting. That phrase in Aramaic, another thing he said in John 3 to Nicodemus, is that you must be metelid man darish. Okay? What does that mean? That word rish or reish means head. Now let me explain what head means, okay? It doesn't mean this. People can say born of the crown chakra. That's nice. It could be that. It could be part of it. This was called the Christ chakra in Gnosticism, okay? That's a good one. That makes sense. But let's look. As a matter of fact, that's what Christos means, open channel of divinity. Now here's head. In the Gospel of Thomas, not allowed in the Bible, in the Gospel of Thomas, and I will say Thomas is not a person. Thomas is Tomas, which in Aramaic means twin. Meaning this is a reflection of the fundamental guy that's been kind of shown for the last couple of decades. Okay, here we're showing a reflection. If you're at the head of a line, where are you? The beginning, right? Or we naturally say beginning first. There's another head on the line. The end. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. I am projected into this world and not of it. Now let me explain head to you. First of all, the head means the beginning. It's the beginning of a cosmic expansion, okay? The head, as an example, what they asked him in the Gospel of Thomas, they said, can you tell us how our end will come? And although it doesn't say chuckle, I assume he probably chuckled and said, okay, have you actually found the beginning that now you're looking for the end? And he said, blessed is the one who takes his place in the beginning at the head, for he will know the end, or the head, or leading edge, and he will not taste death. Remember, he came to crucify the world, the cosmos, Alma. He came to crucify our belief in time and space, and inside and out, and light and dark, and positive and negative. These are all qualities of a singular continuum. They are not anything that is separate, because if you take one away, the other is gone. Okay? And there's actually a word I'd like to share with you. Bereshit. This is the first word of the Torah. It's the first word of the Torah. It's also the beginning of the Gospel of John. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that this is to expand on the idea of the head, the beginning and the end. A lot of people don't realize that the original Hebrew Torah, which of course begins in Genesis, Bereshit, with in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, even higher than 30, 913 clear and distinctly separate ways that you can translate that from Hebrew into English or Hebrew into Greek. Interesting. Not many people realize that this is it in Hebrew, this is it in Aramaic. Same pronunciation. Most people don't realize that the original Hebrew Torah was not words and verses and phrases. That came hundreds of years later. It was actually a string of characters like a mathematical algorithm or a constant like pi. Okay? And it wasn't broken down into the metaphorical storyline of in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth and Adam and Eve and snakes and Cain and Abel and all this other stuff until hundreds of years, possibly over 1,000 years later. Okay? Because it was just a string of characters. And they didn't read the characters, they toned the characters. They still tone them to this day. Okay? Now, what's amazing about Semitic languages is each letter has a meaning. And it's amazing that the very deep nuance of Genesis is unpacked by the realization that what they would do is they would tone each letter individually unto itself, but the gist was much like George Seurat or a pointillism painting. When you're in close, you see smashes of paint, and you get so obsessive about detail, but the key is being able to pull back and holistically see the whole. So they would tone each letter and also be in that flow and be able to, as much as possible, take in the fullest nuance of the text. Now, this is something that's going to unpack the inside-outside beginning and being reborn from the head thing a lot better than you could even imagine that it is. There's a reason why it's at the beginning, and I really think the Gospel of John should have been at the beginning of the canonical Gospels, but of course they put Matthew there because it had all the begatting. The funny thing about all the begatting is they're showing you Jesus' bloodline, right? Right? Who's his father? God. Does he have a bloodline? That's number one. Number two, who's right before Jesus in the bloodline? Joseph, his stepfather. They're not showing you Jesus' bloodline. You're showing you Joseph's stepfather. Hello, McFly. Pick one, y'all. Stick to the story. You go to Luke, they do the same thing, but they do it in reverse, and it goes Jesus to Joseph and goes all the way from Adam to God. It's not his bloodline. That's an example of a secret, something that's right under your nose that you've seen 1,000 times, but you never thought about before. There's a lot of that stuff. Now, Beit, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yod, Tav, okay? That's what we've got here. Bereshit. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you a very simple process of the letter meanings of each of these letters, okay? And this is just one word we're going to do it with, all right? So I'm going to ask you to just pay attention for just a couple of minutes. It's not going to take long. Now, the first one is bait or bet. When you know in the beginning, in the is the word bet or bait, okay? Now, I'm going to have to erase this. Michael knows I get all excited and passionate about this stuff. He doesn't get excited and passionate, though. Yes, he does. There we go. Woohoo! You trying to erase me? Now, this is what the letter bait means, okay? And intriguingly, bait or beata, it's also a word in Latin. It means this. It means house, okay? Now, this in Proto-Semitic, the earliest style of writing that we have, bait means house. It still does to this day, and it looked like this. It looked like a house, but let me explain something to you. House, bait, when you know Beit Lahem, Bethlehem, the house of bread. Okay? Interesting. House, bait, doesn't mean just a building with bricks and structures and walls. Take a breath. What it means is it's the differentiation between the inside and the outside. The object of my attention appears to have an inside and an outside, light, dark, positive, negative, masculine, feminine. It also means burst open. It's the root of the word blessing. Okay, and I said yesterday, it says that we were born as the original blessing of life itself. Okay? So we've got burst open as its own blessing from inside to its outside. All right? The next letter is Resh. Resh is the word head. It means leading edge, or it means source or leading edge. Head, okay? You know what's amazing? The original letter looked like this. It was a neck with a head on it. Interesting. So, next letter is Aleph. Aleph is actually the first letter, well, rather than writing the letter, is actually the first letter of the Hebrew and Aramaic alphabets, and it sounds like this. Listen closely, okay? It doesn't have a sound, technically. It is often pronounced like this, though. Okay? Now, this aleph is put in words to keep a word in motion. Part of it, there's a symbolic depth to it, which I'm going to get to, but it's not the same as having a space there, even if it's not spoken. But the difference is that you keep it moving, okay? You stay in motion. Now, what aleph meant was ox. Wow, that's the key to the cosmos is ox. Huh? The original letter looked like this, okay? This was the original letter for aleph. What does that look like? It looks like an ox. Why? Because Then and now, the ox was considered to be an animal in agrarian societies, agricultural societies, that was so tremendously powerful because it didn't just have strong haunches or shoulders or back or legs, but rather that it gained its tremendous strength only when it was in a state of absolute wholeness. Strength only comes when we are holistic and whole. That's where power comes from. That's where all power comes from. That was represented by the sound ah, which was aleph, which is everything. It's the whole ball game. You getting what I'm saying? And then we've got the letter shin, or sheen. Now what's interesting about this one, I'm just going to put it below. It looks like this. This is literally the original letter. It meant shine, sheen, or express. It was a lip with teeth underneath it. We're going back about 8,000 to 10,000 years right now, okay? It means shine, sheen, or express. Whoa. The next letter was yod, which means hand. When it says in the Gospel of John, nothing existed except through his hands, beyada, ada, or yeda in Aramaic, that doesn't mean that God's got a workbench up there and he's building the world. What it means is everything you see is God. There's no outside God. There's no outside presence. There's no all-powerful anything except that which you have not opened up your awareness to. Okay? But that yod means to reach out. It means to reach out. The original letter looked like this. It was an arm with fingers on the end of it, a hand, and it meant reach out. And then the last letter looked like this. Just two lines next to each other. That word means reflection or echo of itself. Now, if you just look at the word Bereshit, and then I'm going to turn this back to Michael, this is just the first word of the Bible, okay? You've got Reshit, which is a woven net that a fisherman would use, and the Reshit, or Reshit, it would be squeezed down, and they would throw it, and it would go like this. Reshit, that's what Reshit means, the casting out of a net. Okay? In the middle is Resh, which means head or leading edge. Reshi literally means at the leading edge of the rushing headwaters. Kind of like you're going down a mountain stream and you're surfing the leading edge of the cosmos. You ever have that feeling when you're so fully, wholly present right now in this moment at your center that you feel as if you're at the leading edge of all creation? That's what it means to be born again. Literally, looking at this word, there's also Ash or Aish, which is an expanding fire, bursting open as its own blessing from the head or leading edge of everything to shine, sheen, express, and reach out to become its own reflection. That's just the first word of the Bible. Do you think maybe we missed something? That's what wholeness means. You get it? Oh, I got the paper.
And you can't figure it out.
Yeah, your brain can't hold it. Forget
You
it.
got to be in the energy of it. You trigger in me the memory of something that Carl Jung said that I think was so powerful. And he says, who looks without. And of course, looking without means you paint a picture on the inside of your eyeballs and you think you're looking at something out there. Who looks without dreams. Who looks within awakens. And when you start looking within, when you let this take you within, when you let your breath take you within, then everything is transformed. Everything changes. And there comes a space for wholeness into this expression. Pretty cool. And you can't do it by keeping your attention on what's in your brain. You actually have to ultimately repent. Does that mean you have to proclaim yourself a worthless sinner and repent?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I don't want to do it.
So it means to turn another way. You look at people who are looking without, as Carl Jung said. We think it's out there, and we're in a dream. We're stuck. We're lost in a dream. And you want to turn your vision 180 degrees in the other direction. To look within and see that the source of the world that you live in, the source of the construct. For those who weren't here yesterday, we quoted from a CIA website where they're working to understand how to get the best perception possible from their analysts to get the best intelligence possible. And what they literally say is that we do not record reality, we construct reality. And every reality that you see through your body's eyes is painted on the inside of your eyeballs from what's moving inside of you. If you never get beyond what's painted on the inside of your eyeballs, then you'll live forever in a dream. And the horror, the dream of the world is, somebody else did this to me, and therefore I'm hopeless, I'm helpless, there's nothing I can do. When you give up looking without at the dream and you repent, you turn in another direction, you awaken from the dream because you're now directly in touch with the root of the dream. You bring your human life, the active presence of love and the breath, to the dream, and the dream starts to dissolve. Then you get a set of directions that comes from a different place. You know, we spoke yesterday about the Creator. They say the Creator is omnipresent. If the Creator is omnipresent, is in every corner of the universe, there's that active presence of love. And the physicists, as we said yesterday, tell us that every molecule in the universe is in continuous communication with every molecule in the universe. Is it possible that when we can collapse our preoccupation, that is, forgive our preoccupation with what's out there, drop within and remove it, then we move into whole field perception where we are literally guided by these energy forces that come from the Creator through the whole creation, and therefore our structure, our realities are structured out of literally the energy field of the Creator, the mind of the Creator, rather than the mind of your body. When you move there, you get to live in the present. And the reason they call it a present is because whenever you're there, there's a gift, there's a present. And it is that active presence of love that will clean up everything in your structure that never belonged there. Thoughts?
Just one little piece, literally. Just two little pieces then, okay? You know, one of the things that I had a dear friend, this is going back in the early 90s, his name was Michael Talbot. We lost Michael to leukemia, a really rare form of leukemia. Had such an amazing relationship with him. He lived up in New York City. He had a book that he wrote called The Holographic Universe. And one of the things about Michael is he did lots of research into the holographic nature of reality, which of course has been something that's been out there for probably 100 years really fully formed on one level or another. But it's an amazing thing that if you take a whole holographic plate that has a three-dimensional image in it, and this is an actual true laser hologram. A laser hologram, you can aim the laser in and actually encode the information in that holographic plate, and if you give just the slightest degree of shift, you can put another whole full image and another one and another and another, like these infinite dimensions, the mansions of many mansions that we live in right now. All of these infinite images can be shown in this laser plate. And you shine the laser in at whatever angle it is, and you'll see the one that went in at that degree. What's most beautiful about this is if you take a holographic plate and you drop it, it shatters into thousands of pieces on the ground. And you shine a laser into every single sliver and splinter that it broke into, you can put it at the exact same angle and see all of those images wholly and holistically in their entirety on each sliver. But there does become a point when the slivers or the breaks become small enough that the laser will no longer be able to perceive the image of holism anymore. There's a point when that doesn't mean it's not there, but it's almost impossible to perceive anymore in the world and locked in it.
Separateness.
Exactly. And that brings me to the second point, which is this. John 3:16, Let me just say it clearly without going into all the studies there are, that it was actually a right-hand marginal note that was integrated into a copy of it. The Gospel of John, Yochanan, was originally called the Gospel of the Beloved Disciple. John 3:16, everybody, you see it all the time. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believeth in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting or eternal life. And I just would love to just get this one thing out there very briefly, and I'll show it to you in English. Okay? This is the word in Aramaic. Yeh, Hud, Aya, Yechidaya or Echadaya. This is the word in Greek, mono gones. Now, what does mono mean? One. What does gones mean? Gona. Birth, born. Only begotten. Now here's an interesting thing, okay? Does anybody know when monogenes was defined as only begotten in John 3:16? We know the exact year that it was given its definition. Monogenes was already in the text of the Gospel of John. They didn't define it until the 4th century in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea. And they picked 4 possible definitions, and they chose one out of a hat. The one that they chose was only begotten, and Constantine was very clear that the reason they chose it was because Horus was known as only begotten in ancient Egypt, and he knew people would eat the story that much easier. It's not a secret. Research it. Interesting. You know what it means in Aramaic? Yah means who. It's a point back to Yahweh, the oneness, the wholeness. It doesn't mean who as in you-who, person, but rather the I within the I, the who behind the who. Okay? Chud in Aramaic is literally the word one. It's the word one in Aramaic. It's the number one. Okay? Aya is an interesting word because it's in many languages. And what Aya means is something that has no beginning and no ending, much like a vine. Something that is growing, and it's one with everything. It's always in a process of oneness. It's always in a process. On one level, it's on a process of oneness. On another level, it's in a process, in what seems to be the physical world, of constant growth. It never stops expanding. Yechid Aya, one who is absolutely single and one with everything. There's no such thing as a begotten in it. There is no begotten. Because begotten implies what? Two. There's no two in the word. It actually says one. Intriguing. Think of the pain and the torture and the suffering that's been done in the name of John 3:16 because people think other people don't get it. When, bless their hearts, even ministers who have been in the pulpit for 6 or 7 decades of their life, and they've gone to the theological institutions and they've got all the numbers and letters behind their name, they don't even know the history of their own religion. I say that with absolute love and peace. It's time for us to wake up because ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is blindness. And believe it or not, you're the only game in town because there's only one.
Okay, let's look at the opening words in the book of John. We're told that it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In Aramaic, it's something much more profound than just speaking a word. There are a couple of different ways to translate it, and one of them is mind energy, and the other one is willed action. And when you think about that, and then, so often now, today, we get the benefit of the world of physics and the world of physiology and research that goes into the science of it, and it all starts to make sense. Now, there's a video that we carry with an interview with a fellow named Bruce Lipton, who's a cell biologist. And when I first was introduced to Bruce, it was after I'd done a television interview up in New York, and this gentleman said, "Are you familiar with Bruce Lipton?" This is back 20 years ago, before Bruce was very popular. I said, "No." And he says, "Well, he's a cell biologist, and he's doing the same work you are." It's like, really, a cell biologist doing what I'm doing? And he handed me his video, said, "Here, watch this." And I was just amazed at what unfolded. And one of the main things that Bruce talks about on that particular video is that when you think a thought, that thought becomes a molecule in your structure. Actually, Deepak Chopra speaks about that action as the non-physical becoming physical. Mind energy becomes flesh. Willed action becomes flesh. And so what he's showing is that you think a thought, and that thought becomes a molecule. The molecule circulates around in your structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches, an antenna that matches, and then it lands on the cell. Now, what the cell biologists are saying is that this cell then replicates the neuropeptide. I don't believe the cell replicates the neuropeptide. If you look at my hands in the other direction, when the molecule finds a cell with a receptor site that matches, it inserts itself in the cell. And what shows up in the cell is what we call chemistry. There's no such thing as chemistry. In fact, what it is the energetic pattern, and this part of it solidified looks like chemistry in the cell, but it's really a whole energetic pattern. And when it comes to forgiveness, and you recognize that your energetic pattern, your multi-generational database, has the mind energy of every generation in your bloodline, the skill that ultimately you need to develop, if you're really going to perfect the skill of forgiveness, is you're going to have to learn to go inside of those cells to decode their content and remove the ones that have become your flesh that don't belong in human form. So the skill to be acquired is a skill of being able to go inside and retrieve from your genetic structure. You know, when the geneticists first started researching, they told us that, it was 95% junk DNA. There's no junk DNA. I think the official numbers are now down to about 60% of it's junk. There's no junk. It's just the history of your bloodline. When they said the sins of the fathers will be passed to 3 and 4 generations, again, that word sin is just an archery term. It just means off the mark. Anything that's off the mark is an energy that's stored holographically and lands in the cell. It lands in the genes and is passed from generation to generation. And so when you learn the skill of being able to reach in, and it only comes with one of the main skills that Dale's been speaking about. Can I borrow that skill for a minute? Mm-hmm. When you breathe. And that opens the veil, the barrier between what we don't want to be aware of and what we are aware of. There are certain things that we've approved and said, I'm willing to look at this. But when something starts to move in us that we don't want to look at, what we generally do is hold the breath. And holding the breath causes us to dissociate from that mind energy and to no longer be able to decode it. The problem with doing that is because you live in an energetic universe and everything that is in your structure is literally energy in motion and sets up energy waves, then because resonance means motion toward, somebody who's in resonance with that mind energy in you is going to show up in your life. The person with the decoder for what you don't want to decode is going to show up in your life. And you're not going to be happy when they show up because what they do is going to resonate everything you don't want to feel or decode. And so what happens is people shut down the breath. They create an artificial barrier, a veil in their temples. This isn't about a purple curtain in the church when they said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain. The veil is created by locking down and creating this artificial barrier and creating a dissociated mind, a mind that we cannot touch, a mind that is not ours to change. So the very things that you most want to change in your life, as long as you stay in denial, they're hidden from you. And denial looks like you made me. When there's a problem inside, that we keep creating pictures of something that we think is outside, then as Carl Jung said, we live in a dream. We live in the dream that everybody else is doing it to us. But there's a really important piece of the puzzle that we miss. While we're out there proclaiming how everybody else did it to us, we're still feeling the pain of it. Now there's a test we've developed in this work for determining whether or not something you're feeling is yours or not. And the test goes like this: are you feeling it? If you're feeling it, you know it belongs to only one person. If you have the capacity for hostility, fear, turmoil, rage, guilt, grief, pain, or trauma, it's because it is an energy in your structure. And until you're willing to capture that and remove it, and it is a skill. I remember several years ago I bought a computer online, got the computer, hooked it up, and there was a problem with it. I called tech support, and the tech support people said, you know, we can't do this over line, you're going to have to send it back to us. So I sent it back, and they ostensibly fixed it. I got it back, plugged it in, it was exactly the same. Got online with tech support, sent it back, and they ostensibly fixed it, plugged it in, was the same. My son did his computer training with a former NASA computer scientist who was a genius with computers, but had several businesses going, and he's a good friend of mine, and I didn't like to disturb him. But after the second time of the company that owned the computer, built the computer, when they couldn't fix it, I called Graham. And, Graham, I've got a problem with this computer, can you help me? He says, sure, what's going on? And so I explained it to him. He says, well, go to a C prompt. I said, what's a C prompt? And he explained how to get to that. And he gave me a string of characters to type in, and I typed them in. And he said, read that back to me. So I read back what came up. He said, okay, type this in. Read that back to me. What's it say? I read it back to him. He said, okay, type this in. It's fixed. Graham, come on. You're kidding me. No, it's fixed. Well, how come that... Michael, it's fixed. Now, how does a NASA computer scientist know that it's fixed? He's developed such skills. You know where Tiger Woods was today? One of the best golfers in the world. You know where he was today? He was out on the golf course. He was chipping shots. He was putting. He was driving. If you want to become a master of your life, if you want life and you want it more abundantly, then you're going to have to go over after that set of skills in the same way as a Tiger Woods or the same way as this friend of mine, Graham, had. And as you develop the skill of breathing in the presence of your trauma, of opening to it and moving it, you open the veil of your temple. You open the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious. And you have access to those things that never belonged in your bloodline. When you have access to those things that never belong in your bloodline, you remove them, you forgive them. You no longer put those things into your brain's image of your brother. What did Yeshua say? You must forgive from your heart, your unconscious, that which you put into your brain's image of everybody else. And you want to believe everybody else is the source of your disturbance. If you're still capable of disturbance, you have a problem. You ever say to somebody, you made me mad. You hurt me. You disturbed me. You really have a problem. You ever say that to somebody? I have a question for you. If they're the one with the problem, why are you the one with the pain? Do you think pain belongs in a device made by love? It doesn't. But your brain can lie to you and make up pictures of how something outside of you is the cause of what's going on inside of you. The skill you need to be developed is the skill of accessing everything that never belonged in your bloodline and removing it so that no matter who shows up, no matter what shows up, you're not capable of pain. That all that is incarnate in your form is the active presence of love, your human life. And if you believe it's about anything else, then you've got all kinds of dramas and traumas that you blame everybody else for. And it's time for us to learn to literally remove the capacity for any form of drama and trauma. You must forgive from your unconscious, from your heart, from your dissociated mind, that which you put into your brain's image of everybody else whenever it's triggered. And you'll notice when people do that, they usually start with their enemies. But if there's no enemy handy, they can use their spouse. And if their spouse isn't handy, they can use that child that was so dear to them, or any object of attention will do. You remember the forerunner to this mind that was in Christ was who? John the Baptist. What did they call John the Baptist? He was the raving maniac in the desert. The desert is another code word for the unconscious. If you want to truly live in the mind of love, you're going to have to meet your John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is the one who can reach into your unconscious and show you everything that you never wanted to deal with, everything that you never wanted to feel. Now, there were two skills, if you ever decide to play that role for somebody, there were two skills that John had not bothered to develop. And that was, before he confronted someone who was living in a lie, who still had the capacity for some sort of turmoil, confusion, or pain, he confronted them, and when you confront someone in that state with truth, their stress goes up. And most people have their stress attached to the source of the information that shows truth, and they want to get rid of it. So John didn't know when to duck and when to hold the mirror up, and they took off his head. Be careful when your stuff comes up to own it and stop taking off other people's heads. Stop talking about anybody else if you're in pain or turmoil, because talking about someone else when you're in pain or turmoil is called denial. And when you deny, you dissociate. And what you dissociate from is the only thing that will kill you. If there is a frequency in your cellular structure that can cause disturbance or disease, then you need John the Baptist to bring it up for you. And then you need to breathe.
The veil of the temple was rent in twain. The veil in the doorway of the temple was rent in twain from top to bottom. Ape tareya the haikla. The veil of the temple. First of all, he mentioned a purple curtain in the doorway of the church. It's nice, and there's validity in making a building and putting a curtain there and making the inside of that the holiest of holies, and only the high priest can go in there. Whether they actually demonstrate true cosmic love or not, it's just the way it is. Those are the rules. But let's get clear that the holiest of holies is right here. Now, ape tareya the haikla. Haikla is the word for temple. It's the word for church. Haya, I come to give you haya, give it abundantly. Said that yesterday quite a few times. The word save is haya. Salvation is haya. Resurrection is haya. All these different words that have been translated in all these strange sort of evangelical Christian ways, it's all the same word, and every single one means conscious life energy. When you have haikla, kla is the ka, and la, it's a gathering of conscious life energy, and that's the body temple. It's also the word for church, a word for church or sanctuary. But let's go back a little bit. Ape tareya the haikla. Tareya is a word that a lot of people skip over. They just say the veil of the temple, but it's the veil in the doorway of the temple. That word tareya means door, doorway, doorkeeper, or portal. A portal is an opening between two dimensions, between two rooms, between the inside and the outside, whatever you say. Portal, interesting. Go back one more word, which is ape, and this is the word for veil. Ape. Now, pe is an Aramaic letter that means from the mouth, okay? It means from the mouth, ape. Intriguingly, when Yeshua said, that in which you judge another, you are guilty of practicing, right after that he called them something. What did he say? Called them a hypocrite. Hypocrite. Hypocrite sounds like this in Aramaic, ape. It means to puff out from the mouth. Ape also means this. It means veil. We just said that. Ape also means sake. Like, for your sake, Johnny, don't run out into the road. What does that mean? For your what? Safety. For your, I would say for your apparent safety. Sounds like A Course in Miracles, talking about the safety of the ego, which has no safety in it whatsoever. So we've got veil, we've got hypocrite, we've got sake, but there's something a little closer to that. It also means person. Person in English comes from the Latin word persona, which means mask. Now, the ape in the first century was a mask that an actor would wear in a divine play. They would show up on stage with that mask on, and by the end of the play, they would drop their mask and reveal their true inner light and absolute eternal divinity. When someone heard him say ape, they would not have heard hypocrite. That's an English word. They wouldn't have heard veil. That's an English word. They wouldn't have heard sake. That's an English word. What would have been going on for them was, oh, I get it. It's the mask that we wear. You getting what I'm saying? In other words, it's not you that judges the other, it's your mask. It's where the 666 was. It's your antichrist. It's anything, Christ, remember, Christos, look in Strong's Greek Concordance, open channel of divinity, okay, if you look at that in Greek. Anything that blocks the portal is antichrist. Anything. Anything that keeps you from being open is antichrist. And you know what's really convenient? If you try to spend decades and hundreds or thousands of years looking and labeling an outside antichrist. Because you know what that does? It enables you to make somebody else the perpetrator. It makes you the victim, and now you can fight against them so that you don't have to take care of any of the dynamics that are already running around in your heart. What is it that Gandhi said? There are no devils in the world except those running around in our own hearts. And I love, Yeshua said in the Gospel of Thomas, that which you bring forth from within you will save you. That which you do not bring forth from within will destroy you. Nice.
And they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. Now notice, if you live in the outer eye, you think the issues in your life are somebody else, right? Anybody ever said that to somebody? You made me mad? You made me sad? You made me afraid? Most of the world has this belief that if somebody else hadn't done something, I could be at peace. And that's a lie. The only reason I can't be at peace and in connection with the actual presence of the love that I am and that I live, move, and have my being in is because there's something in me that I don't want to deal with. And that which is in me that I don't want to deal with literally creates a high energy wave that, if it's of a destructive nature, of an hostility or fear-based nature, literally is radiating into every cell of my structure continuously and destroying me. So if I speak a word about my disturbance as being your fault, I'm destroying my own cellular structure. And so it's out of my heart, it's out of what I hold within my own denial system, my own dissociated mind, that energetically draws the issues to me that I need to deal with. And then somebody shows up, and what does virtually everybody in the world do when somebody shows up that resonates their disturbance? Well, let me explain to you what's wrong with you. Let me explain to you what you just did to hurt me, to cause me pain. And Yeshua would say, you must forgive from your heart that which you just put into your brain's image of your brother. And as you go in and remove that, and the basic thing that drives the mind to produce the pictures that it does on the inside of our eyeballs, remember we talked about 10,000 brain cells fire, 9 bits of data go into perception. Something drives that system. And when you know what drives that system and what to do with it, then you change that whole system. And what drives it is our goals. You'll notice you've never been upset with somebody who's meeting all your goals. If they say everything the way you want them to say it, they do everything the way you want them to do it, they bring what you want them to bring, and they obey every infantile goal you have for them, notice you're quite happy with them. But when someone violates a goal you have for them, what happens is that goal becomes a driver that causes your mind to use your own dissociated content to build a picture on the inside of your eyeballs that makes it look like it's about them. The core of the forgiveness process, but the core of the forgiveness process looks like this. When I load a goal into my mind that causes my mind to use some kind of disturbing energy in me, hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, pain, confusion, whatever it is, when I load a goal that causes my mind to move that energy in me, then I build pictures out of that energy of somebody else and talk about them. That's denial. In Aramaic, the word forgive is shabag or shabak, and it means to cancel. When I realize that what's driving my perceptual system to use my dissociated hostility or fear to produce my brain's image of another, I now live in a dream, as Carl Jung said, who looks without dreams. I live in this dream that everybody else is the problem in my life, and therefore there's no resolution. When I recognize it's my goal that drives the dream, then I shebag the goal. I cancel the goal, which seems totally insane. But when I realize that goal is driving my perceptual system to use my internal information based in hostility, fear, confusion, rage, whatever it is, then by canceling my goal, I collapse the whole projection. And when this projection collapses in on itself, I drop right into the part of my mind that holds the disintegrative energy, the sin, the energy that's off the mark, that doesn't belong in me. So I open a pathway into that dissociated part of my mind, and as I do, I'm able to bring that information, instead of bringing it forward as pictures of everybody else, by going within, as Jung said, now I've awakened. I'm in direct relationship with that energy. I bring it to the presence of active love, my human life. I ask Rukha the super processor, for support, and all of a sudden I process through that, and my temple is freed from that. I've opened the veil of my temple with forgiveness and removed what didn't belong. And that's all been misinterpreted to be about some kind of building 2,000 years ago. And it becomes irrelevant to who you are today. Are you still capable of any former hostility or fear? Notice that when it comes up, you talk about somebody else. That's the whole game of the world. Buy into the world's denial system and make it everybody else's fault. We can never drop into the part of us that is our disease and heal it. You've got to crack open the veil. It's done with forgiveness. It seems totally backward to have a perfectly wonderful, awesome, sweet, tremendous goal and cancel it. But I collapse the picture that keeps me focused out there, thinking the problem's out there, and I get to drop into where the real problem is. And when I remove what disturbs my peace of mind, then I get to incarnate as a human being. There's work to be done. That part of your mind. And then invite Rukha to assist you to process whatever that's about. It's the most amazing process you'll ever see when you actually use it. First century Aramaic forgiveness.
One of the strangest things that I really, that brought up a lot of stuff for me that I had to remove so that I didn't recreate it within my own system. I was flabbergasted when I got deep into some of these scholarly realms and into these rooms, and I was it completely made no sense to me how I saw these theological frames and fences that were passed down for thousands of years, and how there was almost no one who was interested in moving those frameworks to the side and say, maybe, just possibly over the course of 2,000 years, maybe one little thing here and there was possibly not quite correct. Maybe there's just a couple of things that aren't quite completely in high fidelity. But you know what? You can only hold so many corks on a lake down. And now that the internet is out, and everything on the internet is true, right? Now that the internet's out here, you can't stop it anymore. It's out there, and it's coming out. And the young ones that are coming in, they don't have the indoctrination. I realize I'm not doing this for us anymore. I'm doing this, honestly, for the young ones. I'm doing this to help us let go and be open and forgive what's in our hearts, so that they can come in and we don't need to indoctrinate them and drug them down and dumb them down and dump all this garbage on top of their heads to feed the economic, political, and religious beast anymore. We can just let them be exactly who they are. And that's exactly what all of the Yeshua teachings are about. And to know that I'm right here beside you, it's like, come on, with Michael, the great angel himself.
So notice that many of the things that we've said here tonight and last night, for your non-being mind, are hard things to hear. 2,000 years ago, they said to Yeshua, what do we have to do? What's it look like? And what he said in an idiom was, you're going to have to live like I'm living. You're going to have to live as the active presence of love. But you'll notice that half of his audience left his tutelage, saying, this is too hard a saying to hear. You mean I have to give up my rage, my guilt, my hate, my fear, my confusion, my blame? I have to be responsible for that and give it up and live as love? Too hard a saying. I'm not interested in doing that work. I'm out of here. And half of his audience left. If you found hard sayings here, We're going to invite you not to believe a word that either of us have said. We're going to invite you to take the tool of forgiveness, put them to work in your life, and watch what happens. You'll have your own direct experience. And our goal here is to take you into the direct experience where you're in touch with your inner teacher, your inner tutor, and you live your life as the active presence of love.